on, guys, and welcome back to this Elliott Wave series. This is the next video in our series. If you guys have not yet checked out the previous two videos, I'd highly recommend you guys do that. It's got all the basics, the rules to Elliott Wave, and before you really can dive onto the charts, you need to understand the basics of it, the rules, the guidelines, the structures of Elliott Wave. So if you have not checked that out yet, definitely go check it out. It's in the Elliott Wave playlist on the YouTube channel, so make sure you have a look at those before you jump into this one. Now, if you've jumped into this one, if you've already jumped into the previous videos, let's jump into this next one. We'll be looking at on the live charts. We'll be looking at on the real Forex charts. I'll be showing you guys sort of how I count, and I'll show you the guys the structures, the guidelines play out, the rules play out, how we use the rules and everything. All right. So behind me we have the Euro USD. This is the weekly term time frame, but we'll pop over to lower term time frames just so we can have a bit of a better look. We'll be focusing on mainly sort of this structure up over here. We can see this was back in October 2016. We already see some nice wave counts. We see waves 1, 2, that beautiful big extended third wave, 3, 4, and 5. We see a nice corrective wave to the downside. Well, not nice at all, actually very, very messy. We can see it pushing to the downside. We can see a clear start of 5 waves to the downside over here. So we obviously have a single, we've got pretty much a bit of a zigzag here. Looking at the structure, this last impulse wave is fairly messy. We see lots of structures in here. This could perhaps be a very complicated corrective wave running through pretty much the whole of 2019 all the way to 2020. But what we'll be focusing on today, we'll be focusing on mainly on this sort of structure to the upside, specifically this fifth wave right over here. Now we have to keep in mind what it is, the fifth wave, what it indicates. We start to see a bit of a corrective wave to the downside. Perhaps we'll look at a flat maybe, or even a zigzag, or we'll see, we'll have a look at our options once we've analyzed this sort of internal structure of the fifth wave. Now I won't go too much into this detail over here. We can already see a big extended third wave, which is always the easiest thing to look for when we look at the markets. It's either that triangle or that third wave, because if we, like I mentioned in our previous videos, if we look, the biggest wave generally is our third wave, and we can see that very clearly. Big candles, a big movement. So this is most likely our third wave. We can see a bit of a first wave starting off here now, like I mentioned as well. The first wave tends to be a little bit messy, a little bit of uncertainty whether the market's going to go up or down, or whether it's trend's going to reverse. So people are kind of trying to figure out what's going on. Once the momentum kicks in, the hopefulness, the optimism kicks in, we see that third wave blast to the upside. We see a struggle coming back down, which is our corrective wave, and then we see that last sort of push of hopefulness back to the market, and then we start to see our corrective, which then again puts it on a smaller term frame. We see the first wave play out nicely, and obviously the second wave, or whichever part of the structure we're currently in. Now let's pop over to the lower term time frames. We'll have a look at, like I said, specifically this fifth wave over here, because there was a lot of nice Elliott Wave structures in there that I want to show you guys. And from then on, with our knowledge and knowing this is the fifth wave, like I said, we'll move on to the rest of the structure to try and see what we could potentially look for in the coming of Euro USD. Okay, so let's pop it over to the daily time frame. Let's see if we can find that fifth wave of ours quickly. Fifth wave is right over here. Now we can already see that we've got that low. We can see we've got a big spike to the low. So we know this is obviously the start of our fifth wave, or the start of this wave to the upside. We saw this corrective fourth wave was really nice. We saw 3 waves to the downside, 3 waves to the upside, and again 3 to the downside, meaning it was a nice little flat. We saw a bit of including this fifth and fourth wave over here. We saw a bit of struggle in the market, and then we saw that nice sharp sort of pullback to the downside. And now we can see, starting on that fifth wave, I can already start to see a bit of a triangle play out there, but we'll look more into it. So obviously we've got a sharp corrective, a sideways corrective over here, and we could potentially look at that sharp corrective potentially for wave 2 right over here, using that sort of that guideline of alternation, all right, between those two lines. So let's have a look at this. Pop it over to the 4-hourly time frame. Actually, let's pop it back to the daily. I'll just put a line there so we can be a bit aware of where we are. So a line for the start of our fifth wave, and obviously we'll put a line here for the end of our fifth wave. So we'll really break down this entire structure, and we can have a look at what we're seeing there. So 4-hourly time frame, let's have a look. It's probably back this way. Might take me a while to find it. Quickly that way. There we go. I think we're getting close to it now. There it is. Okay, so let's break this wave down. We can see there are a bunch of nice structures. Like I said, there was a triangle we're looking at. Let's see if I can move it over a little bit more, and then we'll pop on the chart so we can really break this down. So we're looking on the high time frame. We'll break it down to, I'll see if we can find it on the hourly time frame, but the data might not let us do it. But let's break it down sort of as we see it over here. So let's pop it over on our drawing chart, pop our whiteboard over, and we'll start off with the very low point that we had back over here. So first of all, let's see what we can see inside this first wave. Now this first wave, we're seeing there are a lot of wicks in it. We see a couple of wicks. We can see that sort of struggle in the market, the uncertainty in the market. We do see a fairly sideways second wave. We also see a nice sideways corrective wave. We see instantly, we see the big candle play out. We see that obviously that third wave of ours play out. So let's label this one quickly over here. We can see waves 1, we see wave 2 ending about here somewhere, wave 3, and obviously our wave 4, which generally probably is a flat or could be a triangle, but most likely looks like a flat. We then see our move to the upside, which is our fifth wave. So there's our initial wave 1. Okay, we see a beautiful A wave to the downside. We see this clean zigzag. This could also look like a potential flat or a triangle. If we have a look A, B, C, D, let's have a look A, B, C, D, E. So we do see a potential triangle play out here. So if we draw our lines in here like so, we see obviously a nice A, our A wave, B, C wave. So a nice zigzag completing our wave 2. And then we start to see again that hesitation in the first sort of structure. Now, knowing that we've got a bit of a strong, well, we do have a fairly strong corrective wave for wave 2, sharp corrective wave. Let's try and see a bit here. We can already start to see a bit of a structure in here from our third wave, that nice big third wave. And then we're also seeing a bit of a sideways movement right over here, all right? So what can we see? We know the guideline of alternation. Like I mentioned before, we can see the waves pulling down, so potentially this could be our triangle wave. We see 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 before we start that. So obviously we've got our A, B, C, D, and E, okay? So let's just keep that in mind for the future count. I'll just draw these triangle lines over here just so we're aware of it. When we start moving to the count, I'll draw this up as well, and then we can obviously alter it as we get to it, okay? So moving back to this part, we need to make sure that nothing breaks the rules. Obviously that first wave over here, no rules broken in this one. We can see we have a bit of a corrective wave over here and a corrective wave potentially over here, sharp corrective. But the issue is we need to have a look at our rules. We can see that that actually comes into the territory of that first one. So this obviously cannot be our first wave. We do see a bit of a hiccup over here. So we potentially could have a waves, small wave 1, 2, 3, 3 over here. Let's have a look. 3, 4, and 5 to finish off that initial first wave. So now we know we've got waves 1. And let's look down. We can see a very nice sort of flat corrective wave. We see 3 waves to the downside. We see 3 waves to the upside. And we see a very strong push to the downside. So this could potentially be a 5 wave structure as well. So we know what that is. That is our flat corrective wave, 3 to the downside, 3 to the up, and obviously 5 to the down. We have that nice ABC structure. A, B, C. Nice flat wave. And let's label that as such as well. Okay. So we've got our wave 1 right over here. We've got a flat wave, we've got our wave 2 over here. Now that's the start of our new third wave, okay? Now we see obviously the strength here, we see strength in here, which is indicating a nice strong third wave. We see a fairly sharp corrective compared to what we saw over here. I mean, we saw this sort of sideways movement for that second wave. We can see a fairly, not too sideways, but not too sharp. We can see a nice sort of move to the downside, so we can start to assume that that's our fourth wave. Now looking at the internal structures of this third wave, like I showed in that previous example, we could see potential internal structures of that third wave, of the third wave as well. Keep up with me, it's pretty complicated. But we see the start of this first wave. We're starting to see the struggle in the market. You know, we're starting the uncertainty of whether this new trend is going to continue. All right, so let's have a quick look on whether also it is going to be a correction. Now obviously we have that overall support sort of structure, resistance sort of structure over here. So we see that uncertainty where, you know, the technical analysts are playing out. They're thinking, well, maybe this is just a retracement. We could potentially see a double top and the market drop. Now let's go with our Elliott Wave analysis. Slightly bit more advanced analysis compared to basic technicals. We see struggle to the upside. We see a small pullback. We can label this wave 1. Now again, like I mentioned, those Elliotticians who, well, claim to know everything, they could potentially say 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now we know that's not true. This is obviously coming into the territory, and it's just going to break our rules, because if you say this was the fifth wave, we could see a very sort of big move to the downside. Now let's start to have a look. Or you could say, you know, yeah, let's start to have a look at, now we can see wave 2. We see the nice sort of strong retracement. We see the internal waves of this third structure, making it nice and clean. We see 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which plays out beautifully. It's obviously nice extended third wave, no rules broken. This wick didn't come into this zone at all, so we know this is a nice internal structure for that third wave. So let's label it as such. So we got 1, 2, 3, wave 3 up over there. Now, knowing that we had a bit of a sharp move, we can see that it is starting to expand, but we did have a big third wave. We see a nice 3-wave structure to the downside, so obviously we've got an A, B, C structure to the downside, and we can label it, we will label it as such, but for this we have a nice 4th wave. Now, 4th wave finished, we can see there is a bit of a structure to the upside. Now, this one is a little bit difficult to see. We see a couple of waves sort of moving, interesting structures inside here, so I'll try and break this down. This could potentially be any sort of a bit of a contracting diagonal, like I mentioned in the 5th wave, but it is fairly difficult to see the sort of the perfect wave count in this one. But knowing all the history we have over here, and knowing everything we've counted back over here, we can assume that this is the 5th wave to complete that structure. So we now have wave 5, and that obviously continues or finishes up to be our overall wave 3. And now, like I mentioned back here, with our wave 2 being a sharp corrective, so we had our wave 2 was a zigzag, and we can assume now that wave 4 is either going to be, well, could potentially be a flat or a triangle or any sort of corrective wave that's to the side. All right. Now, we've already pretty much played out this entire structure for us, so we can see inside here. Now, like I said, we're struggling to see this sort of structure over here. We're struggling to see this last 5th wave, so it's going to be a bit difficult to count it, but let's, with the knowledge of what we have back here, we'll continue on counting. All right, so we can see we've got our 3 waves, sort of a wave to the downside, 1, 2, 3. 3 waves to the downside, we can see 3 waves to the upside very nicely. There is a fairly sharp push down here. We can't see 5 waves, we also can't see 3 waves, so that is fine. Then we see a sort of a final, a nice another push to the upside, so we've already got waves A, B, C, and we've got wave D, moving to the upside, nice 3 wave, and another 3 wave back to the downside, completing that triangle of ours. So we can label this, obviously, we'll probably just use these lines to use them, because if we label it, we'll get a bit too confused with too much on the chart. So let's label this with our wave 4. We can see our structures in here for our triangle, and we can label it, obviously, A, B, C, D, and E, to get that final push of the 5th wave to the upside. So we know this is our sort of our end, actually, of that cycle, right? So yeah, we can, let's label this. So we label this A, B, C, D, and E. Now, that's the same the same level as these waves 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1, obviously. So let's label this now. We know now that we have our wave 4. All right. Okay. Now, obviously, we know now we've got wave 4. We're looking for our wave 5 to finish. Now, but I'm going to have to remove all this. Let's have a quick look at this final structure of ours over here. There's the high point. So let's see what we have on this structure. Okay, let's have a quick pop over. So we know our triangle, our E wave, our 4th wave ends right over here. And we can see that there are a lot of big retracements in this wave. So we could potentially be looking at that diagonal, ending diagonal. We know with the market, we start to see sort of this curved structure in the market. It's starting to slow down, projecting a potential drop in the market. All right, so let's have a quick look, see if we can count this in that sort of manner. So obviously we can see we've got 1, 2, 3 waves to the upside, indicating a potential nice 1st wave. We see a big, deep retracement into here, and we also see a bit of a wave to the upside. We see 3 waves coming up, 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, obviously to the upside. We see a pullback, and we see the final move to the upside. Now we can start labeling this as waves 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now if we use our lines, we can see a beautiful wedge. Now we do see a bit of an overshoot of this trend. Now I unfortunately failed to mention that in the first video explaining the guidelines of everything. But if we have a sort of a wedge to the upside, our ending diagonal 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and we have that wave 5 slightly overshoot this trend, we tend to see a bit more of a dramatic drop instead of it staying inside here, because we see a really final strong blast of, you know, last effort to try and catch the market, and that really pushes through. And once we have that and closes and follows our rules to this, we can then say, okay, well, if it does this, it's the same following with a triangle as well. If we have A, B, C, D, and E slightly overshoots this line, obviously not breaking our rule, overtaking this low, slightly overshoots this line, we can expect a rather sharp or strong movement into the direction of the trend, right? Now, the similar thing goes for these ending diagonals. We see that overshoot slightly, as long as we don't break the rules, as long as that fifth wave is shorter than our third wave, we can expect a rather strong move to the downside like we see here. Once we move out, we'll see it's a fairly sharp move back to the downside. So now we know that we've got our fifth waves over here. We had wave 4 over here, and now we have wave 5 at the top, and now we can start looking at this whole move to the downside. So quick recap of everything. We'll have a quick look at sort of the full structure of this, and I'll label it for you guys as well. All right, so pull it all the way back over here to the start, and we'll go through again and just label it very quickly. So we can see our 5-wave structure to the upside. We've got waves 1. We see our zigzag to the downside. We've got waves 2. Nice big third wave coming all the way to the upside. Massive extended third wave as well. And we see our third wave ending over here. 1, 2, 3. And then we have a nice beautiful triangle for our fourth wave ending. 1 over here. And then we see that leading sort of diagonal finishing up with a beautiful overshoot of that line, indicating strong movement to the downside for our final fifth wave. So beautiful structures. We can see all the internal structures of it. Now, like I said before, looking at the market, stepping back and having a look at what we see first, we see strong movements which indicate our potential third waves. For overall trend, we see the sideways, we see the triangle playing out, we see a nice potential fourth or B wave. Obviously, like I said, triangles only show up in B waves or fourth waves, well, according to the rules of Elliott Wave. We know this is either going to be a final C wave or a fifth wave. Now, looking at the scale of everything and where this triangle sits, we can say this is most likely a fifth wave. We see a sharp retracement back here. Before we even start labeling, we see, okay, well, sharp retracement at the low, we can assume that's probably a wave 2, and we see a nice sort of fourth wave that's nice and triangle. We can assume, okay, well, we've got wave 4, we've got wave 2, assuming now we know where wave 1 should sit. We see wave 1 start off, we see that wave 2 play out, we see our beautiful 5-wave count inside of this structure as well. Knowing this is going to be our wave 3, we see that a nice sort of sideways 2-wave as well, and we see a fairly strong wave back to the downside for our potential interior wave 4 as well. Now moving back to the upside, nice triangle, pullback, and a beautiful wedge to the upside. Textbook Elliott Wave in the Euro USD, a very volatile pair which tends to be fairly difficult to analyze. So that's the nice structure. Now, I haven't yet fully analyzed this wave structure over here, so let's see what we can on the structure over here. We'll go back to the daily time for now. We know there's our fifth wave. We all know that this is the fifth wave. Looking at the previous history down here, we know this is sort of the last move to the upside before we start to see a downtrend. Now, looking at this structure, we mentioned those triple and three, those double zigzags potentially, as well as a zigzag pattern. Now we can already start to see, if we play this out, if I can actually, maybe we'll put on the 4-hourly time frame and we'll zoom it out a bit more so we can see a bit better of that sort of first structure to the downside. All right, now there's that first leg to the downside. Okay, we can already start to see some interesting structures play out here. We see one A, B, C structure play out, which could have potentially ended that final sort of retracement for that whole structure. But we ended up having a 3-wave to the upside, and we took out this previous low, which indicates, okay, well, it's probably going to be a double zigzag. We've got our 3 waves to the upside, and we have a big 3-wave move to the downside, indicating, obviously, we've now got a W, X, and a Y. Get this out the way, and a Y down here, finishing that zigzag. Now we know if we see a 3-wave structure to the downside, chances are we'll probably see a three-wave structure back to the upside, indicating the start of a flat or a triangle. Because we know in a normal structure to the downside, we generally see a 5-3-5 structure. So let's have a quick look at this sort of the big internal waves of the structure. Okay, I'm not going to zoom out or zoom in. We'll leave it here because they're already fairly simple and fairly easy to see. So let's see if we can break them down. Now, like I said, it generally does take a fair bit of time to try and analyze Elliott Wave, but I'll see if I can find these waves fairly quickly in this market. So we know we've got our first zigzag over here. We've got it's a very ugly A. We've got a B and a C right over here. We've also got a B and a A, B, and a C up here with another three-wave. We can see a big pull to the downside. We can start to sort of see that there is a bit of a zigzag in here, so this could cause a bit of issues. But we also see a bit of a hiccup right over there, so that could be a potential, similar size extended first wave and a normal third wave, and then obviously our fifth wave will start to lose the momentum. So again, we see our A. We'll look potentially at a flat over here because I do see three waves to the upside, three waves to the downside, and a rather sharp move to the upside. So this could be a truncated. A truncated means, before we move on to that, truncated means we see this in the fifth or the C wave of a flat. Okay, now truncation is when we see waves 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 does not quite reach it. Now they become quite difficult because we could potentially look at this other being a correction. Now our job is to remember what our rules say. We need that fifth wave to have 5 waves in it. So if we see 5 waves in this, but it does not quite reach that upper area, as long as we see our 5 waves in there, we know, okay, this could potentially be a truncated fifth wave, and the market could push down. Now this is a nice sign for us to say the market's going to be fairly strong, because there was not even enough strength in the market to push it past that third wave. Now, like I said, it happens on a fifth wave, and could also potentially happen on a flat A, B, C. We could see it potentially, pull back fairly sharp, but most commonly it is a very big, bit of a difficult one on the fifth wave. The zigzag, or the flat, not being too much of an issue. Okay, so with that knowledge, let's keep moving forward. So we see the nice wave to the upside. We see A, B, C in a fairly flat wave. We know this is sort of our first move to the upside. We see that structures, and we can say A and B over here, and obviously now we can say wave C is done here. So let's start looking at the internal structures of these waves. All right, so we can see this is we've got a bit of a hiccup over here, and we see some sideways movement. So we can start to assume, because it is our first wave, we can start to assume that this is a leading diagonal. Okay, so we can say that this is now potentially our waves 1, wave 2. Back up here we can see a nice sharp zigzag. We see 1, 2, extended third wave, 3, 4, and 5. So we can see that is our beautiful wave 3, 4, and 5 to the downside. Now we've got this one wave completely charted out. Now we need to start looking for the internal structures of this wave. Now we've started to see a bit of an issue over here, so we really need to have a bit of a deep look. We can see we've got a potential zone over here which does not break the rule. Okay, so this could be potentially wave 1 of this sort of structure up over here. So we can label this as 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to the downside. Nice, a very, very deep retracement for that fourth wave, but we still did not break that rule of it coming into that first wave territory. So now we can say 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There's our first A wave. Okay, nice, first of the double zigzag. We can see very easily 3 waves to the upside, very nicely. We can obviously, like I mentioned, this is that first wave, does not break any of the rules, with the ending of the fourth wave coming into the sort of the structure of that first one. And we can say a very nice, obviously, like I say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is our first zigzag to the upside. Now this one's very easy to see, this zigzag to the upside, and this first wave count's very easy. We see 1, 2, 3. We see a deep retracement, 3, 4, a fairly sharp deep retracement. We also see a bit of a struggle to the upside, indicating the end of wave 5. We can have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right. Now this, like I said, guys, this isn't a perfect wave count. I will need to look more in depth of it, but this is sort of exactly how I would label my Elliott Wave, count my Elliott Wave, looking at the charts. And when I would study it more, obviously I'd break it down to more depth. But if you try and make things simple, guys. That's the whole thing about trading and analyzing your charts. You want to keep it fairly simple or nice and simple. As long as we follow the rules of Elliott Wave, we should be fine, okay? Now, again, we see a sharp move to the downside. You can kind of see a bit of a hiccup there, so we might look at this being A, B, C over there, but not going into too much detail for that one yet. We can also see, now start to see the move to the upside. We see a little bit of a hiccup right over there. 1, 2, we'll look at, we can see internal waves over here, so 3, 4, big retracement, 4, 5, completing that. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to the upside. Now, very sort of bit of an iffy wave over here we're seeing with this big retracement, okay? But we're seeing a bit of a slight sideways move over there. Now, using the guideline of alternation, we can assume that this could potentially be that fourth wave of ours, with wave 2 being a very strong retracement. We see wave 1 coming up over here, wave 2 finishing back up over there, and we see that little bit of a sideways movement we see right over here. So we can now say potentially wave 3, wave 4, and we can finish off with wave 5 up over there. Now, looking for this 3-wave structure to the upside, we have our ABC to the upside, we've got an ABC to the downside, and a fairly strong push to the upside, which could indicate, now looking at the bars of this, I don't want to go into too much of it, but we can already start to see a bit of a structure. Big third wave to the upside. We see this one bar coming down here, 4 and 5, finishing off that B wave, finishing off that C wave of this ABC structure. This B wave structure, sorry. Now we know C waves, unless it's in a triangle, they always have to have 5 waves in it, and there's our 5-wave count. Now, moving back to the downside, we need a 5-wave structure. This one's very easy to see already. We see a big move in the market. That's most likely going to be our 3-wave. We see a big retracement. We can have 1, 2, wave 3, 4, and 5 to the downside, finishing that beautiful C wave and completing our double zigzag. W, X, and Y, finishing it off. Now, knowing that we've got a 3-wave structure to the downside, we can either start a new trend, or we could potentially see another 3-wave structure back to the upside. Now, depending on what we see, if we see 3 waves up, we can look for a looking for a potential flat. Now, we can already start to see here is a very strong move, so we can start to assume that that is going to be a 3rd wave of ours. We don't see any strong, really big, strong moves up in here, so most likely this is going to be an ABC. We can already see a leading diagonal forming over here, with waves getting smaller and smaller as we go. So now let's start off here with our low. Okay, we'll start off here with our low. We can see we've got 1. We've got the first pullback there. So let's really try and break this one down. We can already start to see a bit of a triangle play out here. A, B, C, D, and maybe E down over here. Let's have a look. A, B, C, D, and E. We could have a first wave up in there to complete that structure. So it's a lot of wave structures in here. But let's start off with this one. We can see there's a 5-wave structure up of here, which is, we'll go for the easiest one. We'll try and count the easiest one first. Now, we see a big retracement back over here, and then we start to see the structure to the upside, all right? We see a 3-wave structure to the upside over here, A, B, C. To the upside, we see a nice 3-wave structure to the downside as well, meaning this could be our potential wave 1. Pullback, wave 2. We see a 3-wave structure, another 3-wave structure up. We structure to the upside. We could be looking at forming that nice 3rd wave. We see A, B, C back to the upside. We see a nice flat coming back down. Another one finish, so wave 3, wave 4, and then that final push to the upside to finish off that wave 5. And we're looking at a very nice ending diagonal, indicating the start of this big drop to the downside. Now let's look back at this one. We can already see this does look like an ending diagonal. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 pushing up. We've got the nice retracement to the downside. So we do have a nice A, B, C structure, right? A, B, C structure to the downside. So here we have that 3-wave structure. Let's try and find the 3 waves in here. Try and find the count in here. It's going to be a fairly difficult one, but we'll see if we can manage. All right, so let's first of all count 1, 2. We can see potential. We need to make sure that we don't break any rules. We see it getting smaller and smaller over here, so we can already start to assume that this is also going to be a leading diagonal over here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 pushing up. Okay, now we need another 3-wave structure in here. We have, see if we can have something over here. We need to keep in mind all the structures. We've got 1, 2. Okay, now we need to make sure we've got a 3-wave structure. We can see 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to the upside. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and now finishing off. So wait, let's have a bit of a back looky. 1, 2, 1, 2. Let's see, 5-wave structures. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There we go. That's a bit better. Okay. So now we can say we've got waves 1, 2, 3, 4, and finishing off with that 5th wave. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 up here. There's our completed zigzag. 3 to the up, 3 to the downside, 3 to the upside. Let's move on to this last and final structure to see what we could potentially have for this market. We're already starting to see a low happening here. We're starting to see a rejection of that low. Hasn't quite reached it, but let's finish off this move to the downside to see what we could potentially be looking for now. All right. So we've got our high. That is going to be, we know that's the end of that the ending diagonal of us markets showing us that is sort of ready to kind of push back down into it. Now we see a 5-wave structure, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, indicating our first wave structure. We've got wave 1. We've got a 3-wave pullback, wave 2. We're starting to see a massive extension right over here. We see we've got 1, 2, big extended third wave. Looking over here, we're starting to see a bit of structure over here. It's very intense, so I probably won't dive too much into this one, but we easily see that third wave. 1, 2, 3, we see a pullback, 3, 4, and then we see this 5th wave finish off. We could potentially see the 5th wave playing off as, so we've got that nice finish, final 5th wave for us over here, and we've got now that pullback. So this is our internal wave 3 structure right over here, and we could potentially be looking at a pullback for our 4th wave, and now we need to finish off this 5th wave of ours, potentially 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, potentially finishing over there. Now I'm not going to go completely into the details of this one. It is a fairly difficult one, so we really need to spend a lot of time into it, okay? But let's now finish this count of ours. Let's see if we can get 1, 2, 3, wave 4, and wave 5. No, wave 5 finishing. So this would be actually internal structure. We can probably see 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 perhaps for that third wave. And now we need to look at this final push to the downside. We do see a big, nice zigzag back to the upside. We see 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 with that ending off with that low. So now we can say, okay, maybe this is not our third wave or our 4th wave. We can look at this as our 3rd wave over here. Makes more sense. 4th wave over here, and finishing off our 5th wave for that low when we start off with that new trend. So now knowing that this is our 5th wave right over here, we can start looking at internal structures and looking to build up to see if this is potentially going to be either a 3-wave to the downside, which means we could potentially be looking at a flat, or what else. But we do have a 5-wave count in here. We'll need to be aware of what happens with this next one, because if that is a 3-wave structure and we see a 3-wave structure in here, we might have to rethink our strategy for this one. All right. So let's have a look. This one is fairly messy, so it does already indicate not a great start for us, but we'll have a look and see what we have. Okay, so we could potentially be looking at, remember that first wave could be a leading diagonal, which we could potentially be seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. However, we did not break any rules here. All right, so it could be a normal structure, but we do only see 3-wave structures and this 3rd wave to the upside, and similar for this 5th wave as well. Okay, we don't really see, we could potentially have a waves 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in this structure, or anything like that, but we'll go on what we see already over here. So we could potentially be having that sort of leading diagonal for us for the 1st wave, having wave 1, and our pullback. We can see 1, 2, 3. Are we breaking any rules here? No. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's our first A wave to the downside. 3 waves up, A, B, C. We have A, we've got B, and now we can see, looking for 5-wave structures to the downside, we see waves 1, 2, it's internal 3 waves as well, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right, now this could be our overall 2 waves. So now we need to see what happens. Remember, if we do get taken out here, we do know that this is a fairly iffy sort of count and similar to this one as well. So if we break the rules, so if we do go below this zone, we know, okay, well, let's restructure this count and see what else we could have. All right, but that's that's pretty much the entire breakdown of this Euro USD, guys. I hope that does make sense. The next video will be looking on its potential entries and exits for Elliott Wave, how we manage our trades, guys. If you did like this video, make sure to like and subscribe to get the update for when we release the next video in this series, guys. Make sure to stay tuned and always trade safe.